You're listening to the uMentor talk show, now available on the Umoja app. I'm your host, Imran Dharamsi, and after quite a while, we have a new episode for you. So we hope you're as excited as we are. On this talk show, we invite professionals and teenagers to take us through their journey and give us advice. So remember, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can reach out to them on their LinkedIn or on the Inspire platform in the Umoja app. And so before we start, we wanted to mention a little bit about the Inspire platform. And that is our new question and answer platform for career advice in our Shia community. So it's a platform that you can get while like inside the Umoja app with a free account. It's completely free. And it's designed for our Shia community, for professionals and students to connect with each other. Um, so, so that's that. If you're interested, that is available on Android and iOS. You just download the Umoja app, create a free account, and then click on Inspire. And then one other quick note, we just wanted to thank everyone who contributed to our Keep the Mic On fundraising campaign, which is currently ongoing and going quite well. And just as a reminder, we're able to share these stories of professionals, students, and community organizations only because of your support. So please do consider supporting us, our show at umojaoutreach.org/donate, or again in the Umoja app. And we promise that every little bit does go a long way. So thank you. Now to the main thing for today. Today's guest is Brother Raza Padhani, who is currently a software engineer at a logistics-focused technology company. And prior to that role, he used to work as a software engineering consultant. Before that, he actually worked in supply chain and operations. So we'll definitely talk about that switch that he made. And he also graduated from the University of Florida with a Bachelor of Science in mechanical engineering. He actually started out with a 2-year degree from a community college. So we will definitely talk about how that helped him on his road to success. And in his free time, Brother Raza enjoys playing racket sports, golf, and practicing improv. And one other thing I forgot to mention, he volunteers on the scholarship committee for Seminole State College of Florida to empower students. So we are very excited to hear from you, Brother Raza. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I guess I know I kind of just read a little bit of your bio, but could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and fill in some of those details?
Sure. I first want to say thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the
Of course.
opportunity to be here today. Excited to support your platform and donate as much as I can.
Thank you.
So I'll start from the very beginning. I was born and raised in New York to entrepreneurial parents. My parents started a business from almost nothing, as many other parents that immigrate to the United States do. And I saw their business grow. So they started in New York, in Queens, New York. And I was in Queens for 16 years before moving to Florida. In Florida, in Orlando, finished up high school, started at community college. We'll talk about that a little bit more, and then transferred into a 4-year University of Florida. After that, my first job was in Dallas, Fort Worth. So I spent a year there, and then moved over to the Bay Area in California, spent just over 8 years there. Just recently, just a few weeks ago, relocated to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. My wife had an excellent opportunity, and so we came this way.
It's exciting. So also thank you for making time in the midst of all the craziness and the time zone change to do this. Really appreciate it. Let's actually start with the community college part. So why did you decide that community college was the right path for you? And I guess what would you also say to people who are considering it?
Sure. So for me, it actually the concept of college kind of crept up on me really quickly. So it's high school, kind of like your junior year, senior year, and you've got classes to finish, and even though I had a computer at home, it just didn't dawn on me that this was the time to apply for colleges. Just being like first time applying in the U.S. From my family. and basically what happened was figured out, oh, I need to apply for colleges.
Right.
So I took some time during the school day, actually, in the back of one of the classes that had a computer,
Hmm.
and I ended up drafting an essay and applied to a couple of colleges, and that wasn't enough prep time, and the essays
Hmm.
weren't fantastic, and so I actually didn't get in anywhere.
Hmm.
But I still wanted to go to college. And what I ended up doing was learning a little bit more about community college. I went there, I applied, and I got in. And actually, ended up being the best experience that I've had. If you want, we can talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
um, that's
Of
kind of my
course.
transition into Seminole State College.
Got it. Okay. So actually, yeah, let's talk more about your community college experience. What kind of things did you study? And then after your 2-year degree, how did you find where you were going to transfer to?
Yeah. So in terms of studying, there was it's called an Associate of Arts, an AA degree that takes just about 2 years to complete. And
Hmm.
during that time, you can pick and choose kind of like the prerequisites for the major that you want to go into in a 4-year
Oh, I
degree.
see.
So for me, it
So it's
ended
not
up,
like one set. It's not like one set path that you can kind of tailor it.
yeah, it's kind of 50-50 ish. So you
Okay.
have some core classes you need to take, something like English 1, English 2, some science classes. So maybe it's chemistry, maybe it's biology.
Hmm.
There are a set number of classes, but then if you want to transfer into, for example, for me, it was an engineering degree. I also needed all the calculuses. I needed a couple of more sciences. Um, I needed differential equations, a couple of those classes in order to then be applicable to transfer into a 4-year university
Hmm.
engineering program. But if you know what you want to do, um, after community college, you can go to those advisors and really they can help you out. Especially if you're going to an in-state school, they know what classes you need, and
I
also
see.
when you apply to the university, sometimes there's like conditional acceptance, which is, hey,
Hmm.
we're going to accept you as a transfer student, but you need to complete these other classes before you can come here, and
I
you need
see.
to have these grades minimum in those classes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then how, just like if we can talk a little bit more about the community college, how
Yeah.
did you decide that you wanted to go into like an engineering something um, after your associates?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I wish excuse me, I wish there was a class that just explained to you what majors are. And I really didn't know. I had my dad had done a little bit of engineering
Hmm.
uh, studying when he was a student. Some of my friends that I just met at community college were engineering students, and so I decided, hey, engineering is the way I was going to go. Originally, I started with an architecture kind of focus. So I took some drawing classes,
Hmm.
and then figured out that, hey, I think engineering is a little bit more broad. I can
I see.
be specific later, but I didn't have to choose any specifics right now. So I ended up going
Hmm.
towards engineering.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And what, I guess, what was the timeline for you? What is the general timeline that you have to decide that? Was it as soon as you started, or did you wait a few semesters?
Yeah. So typically, you spend just about 2 years on your AA degree or Associates of Arts degree, and then you spend another 2 to 3 years after being a transfer student,
Hmm.
um, completing your 4 years degree, which would be a bachelor's. So I think I needed to decide close to the year mark into community college, and here's why.
Okay.
In order to get some of those classes.
Hmm.
Those classes fill up just like anywhere else, and you need to plan some type of progression. So in the calculus series, you need to take calculus 1, 2, and 3, and
I see.
obviously the later ones have dependencies on the earlier ones. And
Hmm.
so I basically took classes during my last summer semester, um, in order to. So I took kind of like fall, spring, and then my
Hmm.
final semester, the summer semester, was actually like biology 1, calculus 3, and differential equations. So it's quite a crazy summer, but those are the requirements in order to get into the university program. So I don't want to pressure folks, but I do want to get people thinking early about, hey, what is the direction I want to go in, because
Hmm.
having a good idea does help you. A year and a half before you transfer would be fantastic.
I see.
I basically did full semesters, did the summer semester, had like just a few weeks, and then started.
Oh wow! And then
Yeah,
started third year at
move.
UF.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, yeah, that does sound quite intense. um, I guess just I want to go on that note a little bit more. What were some of the challenges that you encountered when you transitioned from your community college to University of Florida?
Sure. So I'll start by saying that community college was one of the best decisions that I made, right? And kind of
Mm-hmm.
it kind of got made for me, but I'm really
Right.
grateful for that experience. Why is that? So I came in there. Teachers generally are always available for the students, right? Their main job is to teach.
Got it.
Smaller classes, teachers are available for you. It's a smaller community, so if you're looking for friends or to socialize or get involved with, I was in the table tennis club and
Mm-hmm.
a couple other like small organizations. Really easy to get involved. Transitioning to a university, those classes are, maybe up to like 300 students. The teacher, although they're there to provide support, it's not always as easy to get time with them or to get clarity on a certain topic. Um, uh, the classes are also more challenging. And while there's more funding to get involved, right? There's all these sports. There's like proper sports you can get involved with, which is like competitive. You can get involved with some lighter complexity sports, like intramurals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's funding for all of that at university, but you
Yes.
kind of have to go out on your own, right? And no one's really like there. It's not a small community.
Mm-hmm.
I think university at that time had 50,000 students, where the community college, right, had something like 10,000 or less. And at the campus
Right.
that I was at is even smaller. And so the scale is completely different, right? You're in a new place, right? Other folks that had started university right out of high school, they've been there for 2 years. They've acclimated. We're coming in as a junior student. You're just trying to catch up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going directly into your majors classes, right? Which are not there's not that much time to kind of relax, because
Right.
those
Are
major
hard.
specific classes are really hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a lot more challenging, and then now they're back to back. But you came out of community college, like I came out of community college with like the minimum required classes to get into the program. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's just back to back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up being a little bit challenging, but just planning out your time, and understanding that. And I ended up taking 5 years, right? So I spent actually 3 years at university, took classes one of the summers, did an internship the other summer in
Mm-hmm.
order to um, uh, not be taking some ridiculous amount of classes, and also to give myself that time. And I think that's totally fine, right? Even folks that start university from high school sometimes take 5 years,
Right. Of
because
course.
they do those internships. They want to take the class. They don't want to like overload themselves with classes
Mm-hmm.
such that you don't understand the material.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's a good time.
Yeah.
You don't get your college university experience. You don't get that time back. So it's totally fine to spend 5 years. I think the one quick note there is that not all funding sources cover 5 years. Like some scholarships only
Right.
cover 4 years. And so just knowing that ahead of time, saving a bit if you need to, just planning that out, um, and it'll be totally good, totally fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that uh, advice. You mentioned that so one of your summers at UF you did classes, but then the other summer you did an internship. Um, can you talk a little bit more about internships and how important they are?
Yeah. For me, and I think for most people, if there's one thing you take away from today, um, it is if you're in college, get an internship. Um, I think that's it. And here's why, right? It could be paid, it could be unpaid, whatever it is. Get your hands dirty, get an internship. Um, it doesn't even have to be directly related to your major, but I think the thing about internships is it proves to uh, the companies you're applying to full time. It proves to them that, hey, you've gotten that introduction to industry. Somebody's hired you for 2 months or 3 months, whatever the
Mhm.
summer time frame is like. Um, you've gone through that interview process, gotten into that company, you've understood how to work with coworkers and how to work on projects at work, and what it means to really try and make money for the company or accomplish a project on a timeline with
Mhm.
other professionals. Very different from the classroom setting and like team project setting. um, and so when a company sees that you have an internship, they're much more likely to hire you. um, you may even get an offer from the same company, which could be um, an option, right? That's a really good option for most people. For others, it's a backup option, and say, hey, if my number one company coming out of college doesn't, um, uh, is not ready to hire me yet, then maybe I can go back to the company I interned with and spend a year or 2 years there, get more experience, and then reapply to some of your top tier companies.
Right. Okay. Cool. I think later we're going to talk about your final piece of advice, how passionate you are about this point of advice. So I think we'll get to that. Um, so I think you said you got an internship, you worked a little bit, and then you actually transitioned to industries. So that's another really interesting point. Can you take us through that? Like why did you do it? How did you do it? What challenges did you face, and all of
Sure.
that?
Yeah. So for me, it ended up being that I started my first job in Dallas,
Mm-hmm.
and I spent about a year there and got a transfer out to California. And there certainly was an increase, right? The cost of living between um, uh, kind of like the state of Texas and the state of California on average, California is going to be higher. And sometimes early in your career, the your take home pay is not always going to match your expenses in that particular state. And for me, those things got very, very close.
Hmm.
Um, and what did that mean for me? It meant, hey, yes, there was some stress there, but it also meant, hey, this was an opening for the next opportunity, right? Whether it was to apply for a
Hmm.
different job or figure out how to make a little bit more money so that I could spend the time I wanted to in California. It was a great place. I'd never been there before, aside from a couple of days vacation when I was younger.
Hmm.
So it's complete opposite to New York, and said, "Hey, I want to spend some time here. How do I figure that out?" And in California, um, I didn't even know this. There was a tech hub, just like New York City is like really well known for finance. Even though there's
Hmm.
other jobs elsewhere, that's kind of the home for finance professionals. California ended up being the home for tech, like people interested in tech.
Yeah.
And one of the main roles that I was drawn to was a software engineering role. So I ended up trying to study myself for a little while,
Hmm.
but I needed a little bit more structure. So I went to a structured program, um, uh, and just between studying and going through the program and practicing, all that spent maybe about 6 months. And after that, I was
Okay.
able to get a job. And we can talk
Wow.
about that first job. Um, but I just want to talk about the some of the challenges
Sure.
of
Yeah. Of
why.
course.
So starting off with the why, started off as a financial reason. Um, saw the opportunity in the industry, um, found something structured for myself so that I had, it was like, this is how long the program is.
Hmm.
Um, this is what you're going to learn. And it certainly was not everything, right? And we can
Okay.
talk about that. You cannot replace, it's very difficult to replace a university degree for people that
Mm.
do computer science. But I take in a couple of programming classes in as part of my mechanical engineering curriculum.
Hmm.
And really, I found something that I was interested in, right? I've been an iPhone holder for a long time. I wanted to build something that I would use every day, and so I like focused on going into development to make iOS apps. And what
Mm.
did that do for me? It kept me motivated, even outside of class. I'd be like, "Oh, it was it might be cool to build this. And so I got that extra practice, and I built projects. I was able to build projects that I was interested in, on the device that I was interested in. And that's actually what got me into a job. I'll kind of pause there, but that passion is what helped take this structured learning and convert that into my first job as a software
Right.
engineer.
I see. So you not only like you did classes full time, and then you also on the side you did your own kind of thing, your own project. Cool. I think you had mentioned a little bit about managing your finances and how that kind of prompted you to shift industries. So can you talk a little bit more about the importance of this? Um, Maybe some tips that we don't learn in school about managing finances.
Sure. So managing finances is kind of the second. So if you were to take away two things from this podcast, the first is if you're in school, get an internship. The second is have some general structure of finances
Mm-hmm.
that works for you, right? I think there are a lot of methodologies out there. You'll find a lot of articles, a lot of blog posts.
Right.
Pick one. It doesn't matter which one, but pick one and try to stick to it. Why is that important? It'll just tell you, after you come out of school, the expenses are you're responsible for them, and for some people that's it's new, right? And for me, it was kind of new because in school there was like it was kind of a fixed budget. It was like this is how much classes are, spend kind of this much on food, and rent was this much, but there weren't a whole bunch of other expenses. When you come out of school, you want to do some things. Maybe you want a nicer apartment, you want a
Mm-hmm.
car, you want to hang out with your friends. All those things cost money. Um, and so just understanding, hey, this is how much I could spend on living, whether you buy something or you're renting. This is the type of car, how much I could afford for transportation. And then here's everything else. And of course, at the very end, make sure that you're setting some amount to save, right? A dollar
Mm.
saved earlier in your life is going to be worth a lot more than a dollar saved later. So
Right.
make sure you're always saving. And like the thing I did later in life that I wish I'd done earlier is just automate the savings piece, right? Create a
Mm.
savings account or investment account wherever you put your savings, and just on the first and I think it's the 16th every month, the savings just comes out um, uh,
Mm.
of my account where my paycheck comes in. So
Right.
it's automatically savings. Then you don't have to worry about it. And out of all the buckets, I think savings is probably the most important. Um, and if you follow, if you find some uh, like calculator um, that works for you, it might say to save 5 or 10%. It's really helpful. Not only that you do that, but you do it consistently.
Right.
That's what I want to stress. So one day, if you're out of a job or you need to spend some extra money repairing your car, like that's why those savings are there. And then
Mm-hmm.
also over time, it'll become a place where we might be able to pull from to have a vacation, stuff like
I
that.
see.
So very, very helpful. And as you
Mm.
start thinking about family of your own, you may have kids to send to college, stuff like that. So you always want to be thinking into the future.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Um, I think you also wanted to talk about the social aspect of being a professional. Um, so one thing you mentioned that was interesting during the pre-interview was that um, once you, I guess, have a job, the world becomes a smaller place. And can you just talk a little bit more about why that is, what you mean by that, and the
Sure.
importance of having a network and continuing to build it?
Sure. So I think if anyone has an opportunity to do something like this, you should definitely take it on. If you think about school, every day you're around, 20, 50, 100, 1,000 people that maybe or just kind of know. You hang out with doing sports and class and other
Mm-hmm.
things at lunch. But for me, I was in Florida for school, and then I moved to Texas. And so
Yeah.
my direct network, the people around me that I could hang out every day, immediately fell to like, maybe a handful. right? How many
Mm-hmm.
people from Florida moved to Texas at the time that I did? And then from Texas to California, and California is a little bit farther out, so there's less people there, and out to the Netherlands. So there's less people, very few people that, even went to my university, not even in my year, just period, that are out
Yeah.
here.
Mm.
Um, and so it's important to practice continuing to network, right? I do think once you're a professional, you have some extra money, you can travel, people travel and see each other, and so the world becomes a smaller place, right? It's more likely you'll meet the people you want to meet, but they're not always going to be there. And so getting involved in your local community, whether it's a religious community or cultural community, or you're into sports and you get involved with the club, or you're into um, like knitting, or certain type of software engineering, or you're into swimming, just like
Yeah.
going in and joining those clubs and making sure you're continuing to exercise that part of your life, or whether it's going to the gym and taking classes, but not just taking any class, but going to the same class and making friends with, and with the people in that class, and then maybe seeing them outside of work. There's also like there's new people you spend time around, which, if you're not in a remote environment, it may be people in your office. Um,
Mm.
and so if you have time, going to those work activities, or offsites or dinners or coffee chats, those things become really important, because
Mm.
as you become professional, people go different directions, people change. And so to make sure you have um, something outside of work, I think it's important to continue to get involved. It also helps you keep active.
Mm.
Health is another important part, and so I try to pair those things, which is, hey, I really like sports. I need to stay healthy and get a workout, and so can I do something social that is also physical at the same time?
Right. Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you. So the last thing, can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Oh, okay. I wasn't
I will.
prepared
I
for this.
can. No worries. I'll put the link as well here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I okay. I
Sorry
was
for
so
putting you on the
passionate.
spot,
Yeah.
but
I had this full college experience for the first time, and I was unprepared for it for the most part, right? Like,
okay.
I ended up in community college. I ended up transferring to a four-year university, and somewhere in the middle, I found mechanical engineering as my degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
But thinking back on it, I wasn't certain of any of those choices, and almost none of those choices were pre-planned, right? Except when I was applying to universities. I kind of just applied to whichever universities were accepting transfer students,
Yeah.
and ended up getting into one that has a good program for engineering.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I followed that path. And so again, if there's two things you take away, it's get an internship, and have some sort of financial structure for you, right?
Mm.
You can go outside of the financial structure, but have some type of structure that 80% of the time you check with that structure. Say, hey, can I buy this? Can I not? And I was so passionate about that, um, those topics, and I wish I had prepared earlier, and I wish I had some structure around these decisions and some planning. That I just wrote something when I came out of school. I put something together,
Mm-hmm.
and I just self-published it, because I was like, hey, I would love to get this message out. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about this, right? If you're in school, or you're in one of the phases we talked about, getting an internship, being prepared to apply to an internship, talking to the recruiters that maybe come to the college career fairs. Um, I learned, like, the first time I applied, I actually didn't get any offers, and I went back to the career fair more prepared. Right, I'd applied online, I took my resume, I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Here's my application number for the role."
Mm.
And they're mostly I was mostly getting interviews on the spot, because I was more prepared than someone else,
Yeah.
and I ended up getting an offer. Um, and so these small incremental tweaks can really help you stand out. And I learned these tweaks along the way, but I wish I had more answers at the very beginning. It would have really saved me time, would have made things more smooth. And so I hope the process. After this, I hope you take away one or two things, and the process is more smooth for you.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Even though that wasn't something we did discuss, but yeah, thank you. Okay. So we are unfortunately almost out of time, but I think you kind of already gave your final piece of advice, but just maybe reiterate what would be your final piece of advice, the one or two things that people should take away from this podcast or this episode if they didn't take anything else.
Cool. I'll put a slight note. I've already mentioned this before. Get an internship, have a structure
Mm-hmm.
on finance. But just about one final note about that first job
Mm-hmm.
is that aside from having an internship, which is very good, how can you stand out? Everyone else applying to that job from your class or from your school, they've had the same projects, they've had the same teachers, the same classes. So how can you really stand out? And it really comes to working on something yourself, right? What project have you worked on that no one else has? Find something you're interested in. For me, some bicycle safety concept was interesting to me, so I worked on it. Start something. For me, the very beginning was like after learning how to code, it was like actually coding it. But there's also like getting the designs for it,
Mm,
submitting it to the app store, getting it approved after being rejected a
right.
whole bunch of times, learning a whole bunch of things about security, and take a project from the very beginning to the very end, and then spend just a little bit of time learning how to communicate that project to someone else. In this case, maybe it's the recruiter or the hiring manager of this company, and say, hey, I took these classes. Everyone's done that. I had this internship, and hey, I found this, concept really interesting. Um, my dish rack was broken at home, and I built this dish rack, and so I manufactured the whole thing, and I put it there, and it didn't quite work, so I fixed it, and now I have a really great dish rack, and bring some pictures of it. I think things like that. Speak very loudly because it's like, hey, you're motivated and you followed through. Those are two skills that I think are very important, especially in all jobs, but especially going into that first job. So,
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Brother Raza, for coming on. I think we had a great conversation.
thank you for having me again.
Of course. And thank you for tuning in to the uMentor Talk Show. You can tune in again in a couple of weeks for another new interview. And remember, if you want to listen to our previous episodes, you can catch them on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the app, the website, everywhere. So thank you again. Umoja Outreach Foundation, uniting and empowering the Shia community.